things like that in the ancient world. Believe me, there are all sorts of do-it-yourself remedies in those days. But taking a bunch of icky eye salve and putting that all over what you've already got from some type of eye infection, yeah, that's not exactly, hey, let's go look at the really disgusting-looking guy and let's listen to what he has to say as he preaches this message we've never heard of before. Yeah, I can see how that would have caused an issue, and certainly, some people might say, oh, no one would ever be this low, but think about it. If you're one of the Judaizers that wanted to undercut the apostles' authority, there are ways for you to mention the fact that, well, the Judaizers, not only are they able to speak to you, but they can read from the scriptures without having somebody else to have to do that, and they can write letters to you in normal-sized print without having to do it real big. And health is a blessing from God. It might indicate something. If someone's got this constant problem, maybe God's not really with them. And we know that was certainly a concept that existed during Jesus' day amongst the Jews. Remember John chapter 9? And so there may have been a subtle seeking to undercut the apostles' authority by reference to the fact that he really isn't all that impressive a guy. He can't see real well, and he doesn't look real good, and he's not the greatest speaker in the world. Maybe that was a part of it as well. But Paul mentions this bodily condition. You did not despise or loathe me, but, and in contrast to what would be a normal or expected response, the opposite of that is you received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus himself. And so Paul contrasts what they could have been like. He contrasts how a natural reaction might have been to what they really were like. They received him as an angel of God, as one with a message from God. I mean, if an angel is going to come from God with a message, then you're going to want to hear what the angel has to say. And so he says, you received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus himself. And so even if Jesus had come and preached the message, the kind of respect, the kind of acceptance that you would expect to be given to an angel, or even greater to Christ Jesus himself, had been accorded to the Apostle Paul. So he says, where then is that sense of blessing you had? They felt themselves to be blessed by the ministry of the apostle amongst them. Where is that sense of blessing? It seems to have disappeared. What would have caused that to disappear? Could it be that there have been those who've come amongst you, and because of their teaching and what they're teaching, that the sense of blessing you once had in the proclamation of the free message of grace has disappeared, has gone? It's in that context that he says, I bear you witness that you would have given me your eyes. And then he asks this question, so have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? Now, Galatians 4:16 is a verse that I certainly memorized many, many years ago for use on the street in Mesa or Salt Lake City in witnessing to folks when they become offended. Offended that I would say, no, Mormonism is not the truth of God. Mormonism is not the restored gospel. Joseph Smith was not a prophet. But man, in our day, you say anything to anyone, and they become offended. This might be a good verse to have ready to go. Have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? I mean, some of you may have seen the story just this week. But there were a group of people putting posters up to promote a meeting on the campus of Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. Now, if you ever hear the term Loyola, that's almost a certain indication that's a Jesuit school. Ignatius Loyola was the founder of the Jesuits. So you have a Jesuit university, and people are putting flyers up about a meeting promoting pansexuality. It's a transgender movement. If you can't keep up with whatever the newest movement is, which I don't think any human being on the planet could, someone came along. Another student came along. And in the conversation about the posters, can you believe the heartlessness of people today? Another student said, I think there's only 2 genders. I mean, at a Catholic university, to have someone who would actually be so heartless as to say, I think there's only 2 genders. That was so terrible that the groups on campus that are tasked with making sure that we're all thinking correctly had to call the Los Angeles Police Department to investigate a hate crime because someone on campus actually believed there are only 2 genders. And of course, the point was that one of the people who was putting up the signs claims to be transgender. And therefore, you're saying I don't exist. And that's a hate crime. That's the world we live in, folks. That's the world. That's what's coming. That's what's coming. And you might want to just note down Galatians 4:16 is for future memorization. Have I become your enemy because I've told you the truth? Just make sure you tell them the truth. Because in God's sight, no longer in man's sight in our culture, but in God's sight, the truth is the ultimate defense. And as long as in your heart you know you have spoken the truth, and that you've done so for the glory of God, well, that's enough in God's sight, but I can't guarantee that's going to be overly relevant in our society any longer. You may lose your job. You may be financially put in a position of tremendous financial hardship, or eventually you might just lose your freedom. But that's where we are. So Paul says to the Galatians, have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? He knows that what he's saying to these individuals is going to cause a number of people to view him as their enemy. If you had become particularly enamored with one of the Judaizing teachers, if you had even found something pleasant in the idea of becoming Jewish prior to becoming a Christian,